Hello, internet friends, and welcome to episode number 163 of FinalBossTV, your WoW and game rating show. I'm your host. My name is Adam K, aka Bay, and today is the Warlock Ketchup show. Next Sunday should be Hunters, and the Sunday after that should be Mages, and then maybe a tank show and maybe a healer show. But we have a Blizzard live Q&A in 2 days' time, and I bet you the last thing Ian will say is that, oh, beta's tomorrow. So we'll have to see. I want to do the catch-ups on the pure DPS specs, but obviously Battle for Azeroth testing and feedback and streaming and shows about that are going to take a lot of priority, but we're not talking about that at all today. Maybe a little bit, but all of it doesn't matter. It's all just nothing. Like, apparently all that changed for Warlocks is the talent got moved in a row. Like, good stuff. But as Battle for Azeroth does roll out soon enough, we will talk more about it on the shows going forward, of course. But I would not be sitting here today making these shows if it wasn't for all the support the show has been getting on Patreon. And if you want to help the show out and keep going, especially through Battle for Azeroth, then you can go check those out. There are more podcasts on the Patreon page. So if you want 53 minutes of Warlock behind the scenes, then you can go check that out on the page as well. You can follow along with the show notes. I just did an hour-and-a-half long sort of behind the scenes, our first monthly hangout with patrons as well. You can go check those all out there. There's the Rogue one last week. This was the one we talked about the AMR debacle. So you can go just, yeah. Just, it's okay. It was all right. That was something. We're not talking about that today, though. It's not getting there. But Terramaya, Chaos, Jason, Taislin, Screws Loose, Mia, R4, Truffles, and Druish, thank you for being assistant producers. And there's a couple of you out there that are, but aren't right now, but are just do your thing. Take care of yourself. But today, it is time to talk about Warlocks. And as with the Rogue show we had last week, there is fresh meat on this show. So, Loozy, say hi to the internet. There you are. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm Loozy. I'm playing a Warlock in Scrubbusters on Twisting Nether EU.
And you
so I'm the only EU person here.
Well, okay, I mean, come on. That's fine. You had to be on the show, apparently, to balance it out, I was told, right?
Yeah, you know, adding some diversity to the EU over NA battle.
But you're in Scrubbusters, though, so... Yes. No, I was kidding. Returning and hopefully not taking over the entire show, there's Gahddo. Welcome back, sir. Hello.
How's it going?
You are giving me the quota of one guest per show has a 3-megapixel camera. I appreciate that.
No problem. glad I can be of service.
Oh gosh, yeah. And you are wearing a different shirt, despite what we were talking about in the pre-show, so than last time. And then the granddaddy of them all. There's Not. Hello, sir. Welcome back.
Hello, hello. I don't know why I became the granddaddy, considering Gahddo's here, but
oh, are you? Oh, the fan fiction is wrong then. What?
I don't know why everyone thinks I'm the granddaddy.
Oh, so do you have to dispute this right now? Is Gahddo the granddaddy? Is that what I'm hearing here? What's happening?
I mean, Gahddo's been around longer than me technically, so he should be.
Have I? I feel like we both got on the IRC pretty early.
Let's get some fact checking going on here, because something is amiss. We'll figure that out. I'm sure between Twitch chat right now and the Warlock Discord right now, which if you're tuning in from the Warlock Discord, then I'm sorry your emotes don't work here. But yeah, we'll see. But I guess introductions and stuff around. I mean, Loozy kind of already did that, though. I was going to throw the camera back to him and have him introduce himself and say, like, who the heck is he? Because he's the new guy. So do you have anything else that you want to, like, what do you do in the Warlock community, sir? What do you dabble in?
Yeah, so basically the only thing I really do is that I write the overall guides for destruction, both on Wowhead but also on our website, Log One Stop Shop, which we run out of the Warlock Discord. So I'm kind of writing the destruction part of it, where some of the other people who are also involved in the site, they like do all the sims and everything, and then I, write raid guides with suggested talent, stats, all that, so you kind of get an understanding of it and don't just get linked a bunch of sims.
Okay.
So that's basically what I do outside of raiding, of course.
Right. You pull and sort of get all information in one place to make sure that they are. Is it just Wowhead? Like who maintains Icy Vein guides, or does someone else? Does Gahddo do all of those?
I don't know who does
That's still Ferdy.
Oh, okay.
But I do the Log One Stop Shop and the Wowhead guide for Destruction Warlocks.
Okay. Sounds good. And I'll go to Gahddo last, apparently, because he does everything. So not what to anyone else that doesn't know who you are, I want to refresh the internet's memory of what you do in this whole Warlock community.
I pretend to know how to play Warlock some of the time.
Wow.
I as I lose my voice, I raid ultra super casually with SNF again on Illidan, so that's a thing. And I am kind of the main guy slash person, brain hive brain, words are hard, behind Lock One Stop Shop, and yeah, I don't know. I definitely just said the name wrong of the website because that's what everyone memes about in the SNF Discord. So, yep.
Oh,
Just
okay. You gotta don't let them be dreams though. You have to put them out there and let them grow and flourish in this day and age, right? So
only sometimes. Only sometimes.
And Gahddo, do you want to list you could list your accolades now if you want to go by your bullet point list here. Like just go for it. You have the next 90 minutes. You can go for it.
Well, mostly I write things about Affliction because that's my current main spec, and it's a little hard for me to care about specs I don't play. But I run a significant portion of the Sims along with Motoko and Silver for the Warlock community. Between the three of us, we pretty much do all of the simulation craft work, and I also work on the back end for simulation craft along with Pip.
Are you guys looking forward to all the new nonsense you have to figure out really early on in battle, like Titan forged weapons, which don't affect casters as much, but I mean, I'm sure all the melee theory crafters out there are like, yay.
We haven't quite started on any of that stuff yet,
Okay.
but it'll probably, honestly, I will probably be up at like 4 a.m. whenever the day that they release alpha is, just coding random stuff.
Yeah. So you all plugged the lock stop one shop, right? Or the whatever you call it. And this is not every class community has something like this out there as a resource, but the lock one stop shop or LOS is where everything is, like virtually every single thing, right? Is there anything that's not here? Or because I was actually flabbergasted when I was prepping this stuff, is because you actually can't see it because of my screen capture, but there's a glyph section, just so you guys know. You can, everything is here, even though it's just kind of there. But every single thing for all the specs are all posted in one place.
No, we post some stuff in the Warlock Discord in the pins that, maybe doesn't make it onto the website, but pretty much everything is either in the Warlock Discord or on Lock One Stop Shop.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at your relics right now. You even have them all watermarked because you gotta make sure they come from the right place. They will steal your data. I like that.
Well, we had a slight issue at one point with some beautiful grayscaling that definitely wasn't stolen, but kind of was, but also not. So we don't have to get into that.
Okay, I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I didn't want to suggest to bring up any bad blood, but that is something that happens, I guess, in the community when people make.
Oh yeah.
all this stuff. I have never played Warlock since maybe Cataclysm, so all this to me is just hieroglyphics almost. But if you need the place to go for all of this, then this is where you need to go. Because we're going to go through a little bit of talents later on in the show just to sort of put a back and forth on the 3 specs. But for all the other nitty gritty things, just you need to head over here because we're not going to cover all this. This is no time for that. And there's no point when it's all written out so well over the course of the whole website. So, but what you talk about Simcraft and with the state of how Discord is nowadays, when I guess when things change and when Sim builds update and whatever, where do you have a place in the Discord that all goes to update, or you just update like a pin in each of the Discord chats, or like who is responsible for getting that information out to people when you figure it out, right? I guess Gahddo does Affliction and doesn't care about the other 2 specs, but
mostly we pin any new relevant changes in the spec channel for the given spec. We don't have like a dedicated theory crafting channel like some of the other Discords do. We just kind of try and segregate the individual specs to their own channels, and anything related to that spec goes in there.
Okay. That was one of the resource that in these catch-up shows that I want to make sure we plug, at least on the pure DPS ones. We went over this in the Rogue show last week, is a new one called Hero Damage, which going over on the beginning of the show, Gahddo was like, I love this. And then Not was like, what's that? So
What do you mean? I totally love alts and pay attention to alts all the time.
well, come on. But Hero Damage is basically a huge repository for talent combinations with tier sets and legendaries, and then it all sort of parses them all together whenever they're run. And I was actually thinking it was really interesting how close all the different layouts for a Warlock are. I mean, the spec is the exact same for every single one of these outside of like these 2, but they're all within like 1% of each other, all these different top ones between legendaries and whatnot. So if you are coming back to the game or you're looking at other alts, they're all parsed here. So you can go check out this. And of course, this will be more updated and going forward in Battle for Azeroth as stuff gets updated and changed with Azeroth gear and the necklace and the legendaries that may or may not affect gameplay at all. So go check that out if you need it. But is anyone directly working with Hero Damage yet? Because I know we talked on the Rogue show last week that the people that run the SimC modules slowly getting in touch with everybody to make sure that they're accurate. Because then there's also this and there's also raid bots, but that just pulls right from Simcraft itself. You don't have to actually work with them directly with Serial. But have you done anything, Gahddo, yet with Hero Damage, or maybe in the future?
Not yet, but I'm sure that they'll get around to me eventually.
We're probably going to be last.
No,
Given that Gahddo will be the point of contact for it.
Wow. So, the first big topic, so we can actually start ranting about all this nonsense, is that rogues, we talked about this last week on Sunday's show, rogues have a ton of bugs that just could have get integrated into how the class plays. But with Warlocks, you wanted to bring up what happened in Legion to them, which is a bit of a, like, in the weeds can of worms. So I don't know who wants to open this up with what happened to Warlocks, and if you want to bring up demonology first. So I don't, every expansion it seems that Warlock is either way too good at everything or it just gets drilled into the ground with nerfs. But we put Affliction up here first. So Gahddo, do you want to, you talked about this on the BTS podcast about it being just too strong at everything. So what's up with Warlocks in Legion?
Well, it kind of started the same way that Warlords did for us, where we got at least some form of a rework for every spec, and Blizzard overreacted during beta to the how mechanically good each spec was at something, and just left them in a state where they were just really, really bad at launch. And I'm sure anyone here who played Warlock at the start of Legion can attest. It was not a fun time to be a Warlock, trying to pug mythic groups with, you know, destruction not even really being a viable spec. But it also kind of came down to our artifact when it comes to Affliction. A lot of people didn't see the power that Affliction artifact was going to have later in the expansion. Because during Emerald Nightmare and TOV and stuff, you didn't have a completed artifact. Like, everyone was working with like 1 gold at most, right? And Affliction's power is all from its artifact, and it just scales so extremely well compared to other specs.
There was a weird interim during the testing phase. I remember that there are so many like this, all these multiplicative additive benefits across the board, but then they all get amplified by the whole soul mechanic that you guys had.
Yeah.
So that you didn't talk about Nighthold yet, so we got to poke Nighthold.
Not yet, but...
And so what happened in Nighthold? What was the switch that Blizzard was like, let's just click that on, and then...
So it was a combination of 2 different things that happened in Nighthold that really made it extremely overpowered. At the start of the expansion, Affliction was really not a fun spec to play. It just had a lot of really bad mechanics, and a lot of that came down to the talents that we had available that were just really, really unenjoyable to play with. And Nighthold, Affliction got probably the biggest set of changes that any spec got in the entire expansion. They redid most of our talent tree, and a lot of the stuff that they added just was way, way too powerful. But more importantly, about halfway into Nighthold, they decided to just make our artifact work, which was hilarious. Prior to Nighthold, we most of the traits on the Affliction artifact, the golds that proc when things die, didn't work on like mostly any ad in Emerald Nightmare or TOV. So you have things like Soul Flame, which is anytime that anything you have damaged dies, it just does AoE.
Mm-hmm.
You just get a big circle underneath of it that does a ton of damage, and that just didn't proc on like any ads in any of the raids. And halfway into Nighthold, someone at Blizzard decided, we're just going to flick all of the things that proc on death for Affliction on in raids.
Yeah.
And not even consider rebalancing the spec. So suddenly, Affliction Warlocks were running around with like a permanent 20% damage buff, Soul Flame doing 40% of their damage on fights. It was just,
Seems fine, but obviously working as intended, right?
Well, yeah, it is working as intended.
Mm.
They just didn't think about how good it was going to be.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when that switch happened, because I've sort of just been floating along in the enhancement train, and only small changes like switching a talent around depending on the tier ever really affected me. But I know that was a huge swing when that turned on. So they also merged Drain Life and Drain Soul at a point, because you started off with just Drain Life, and then it was a talent, which then in the talent changes that you mentioned, you have to like take it as an upgrade, but then just like smush them together.
Yeah, I think that speaks to a broader topic, which is just the fact that Affliction was unimaginably more tanky than any other spec in the game by miles this entire expansion. Giving Drain Soul baseline as a rotational filler meant that we were just constantly healing ourselves for way more than a DPS spec should realistically be allowed to do. It got to points where I was like looking on fights in TOS, and I would just look at my HPS, and I would be almost at the level of a tank, and then you would look at overhealing, and like 80% of the healing I was doing was overhealing.
Well, we
So I was
no, we
Go ahead.
had on the Method show recently for the world first. There was the screenshots of what their warlocks were doing, and there were some moments with like cooldowns and any debuffs up or whatever that there was like an incoming amount that they would heal for almost half their health every half second or something, like 6 million HPS
Yeah.
or something. Like what?
Drain Soul, if it crits, heals for about 2 to 2.5 million right now
Sure.
per tick, and it ticks more than once a second. So
Yep. It seems
it
balanced.
heals a little bit, but yeah.
I guess the sore spots that Affliction had were up to this point. There was also a big soul shard change across the board as well. Not what happened in the Warlock community when you could start fights with soul shards, which before you just had none going into a combat. When you started combat now, you start with 3, is that right?
Yeah.
You start with 3 now, and it gave you like 300 DPS. It was a pretty significant change. Like literally 300 DPS. It was a fantastic, absolutely beautiful change. The only thing that really happened was Affliction actually had burst on pull now, and then all the specs just kind of were like, okay, whatever, doesn't matter.
It was, to be fair, it was like 300 at the time, but since then the value of a shard has probably like quintupled, so
True.
it's probably a bit more than that now.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, Terran's in chat, and he brings up Tito, like the stupid pet that you guys could get soul shards off of before you... I remember. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Combat rogues used to use it to roll... what's that thing called? Roll the bones before pull.
Before pull. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But Affliction now, though, I need you to bring this up design-wise before we talk about the other 2 specs in Demo and Destruction. It always seems like one spec of Warlock, which it looks like it's Affliction this time, because it was definitely Demonology and Warlords, because that's when Ian, his famous line of, we're nerfing it because we don't want players playing it. And it was still so good! But Affliction now is at the point where... I'll just tab over here real quick, and I have 99th percentile mythic all bosses. Now, granted, this is in Taurus, and there are some fights where this, but I'm just saying, I mean, obviously, yeah.
Obviously.
Affliction is fine.
It's hard to argue that Affliction isn't too powerful at this point.
Right.
You look at a fight like Mythic Coven, and the next highest spec is like 12% behind Affliction.
Sure. And that was probably Balance Druid, and they got nerfed, but not Affliction Warlocks.
Yeah, Balance and... Okay, hey, we got nerfed.
Sure, okay.
We got a small nerf to 2 of our dots.
Mm-hmm. But Not's just, like, holding in. He can't even...
I just can't. Oh, man. Those poor Balance Druids.
They got raked over the coals. They had baseline nerfs, they had legendary nerfs, and they weren't even like the culprit. And Affliction Warlock just kind of walks by with their little like 4% reduction, like, shh, don't say anything. Shh, don't stop. I don't know what happened there, because it's still so... I mean, yeah, chat brings up nerfed. Exactly. You go to Heroic, I'll do Heroic 50 percentile, right? Like where they balanced the game around. And you have Assassination, we talked about rogues last week. Assassination is sort of in the similar space that Affliction is, being like the best spec to play for rogue, and there's Affliction Warlock.
Yeah.
I don't know how enhancements this high, because this doesn't make any, because we're like middle of the pack for sure, but this is 50 percentile heroic, but still. Yeah. Poor Balance Druid's way down here.
A lot of it honestly comes down to one talent that kind of ruins the entire specs. Like they can't possibly balance Affliction because of one talent, and that's Absolute Corruption, which makes your corruption just last forever and do a lot of damage. And you see on fights like Coven,
right,
Affliction wouldn't be half as OP as it is if Absolute Corruption didn't exist, because you would just GCD cap yourself multi-dotting.
Yeah.
Whereas with Absolute Corruption, you just throw them all out and they're up forever, and then you AFK hitting Unstable Affliction on the boss.
Isn't it? I'm looking. I brought the talent tree real quick here before we go too much deeper. Isn't it a combination of Absolute Corruption and, I guess, Writhe and Agony with the Helm? That's why the Helm is so prominent. It's just you're doing your job though, right? You're putting dots on stuff, but it's just this.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I honestly
multiple...
like.
You go.
Go ahead.
Okay, on multiple targets, like stuff like Coven, for example, like you just go, like you said, Writhe and Agony with the Agony Helm, and you go Corruption Ring with Absolute Corruption,
right?
And you take the two talents that like increase the damage of the two abilities, and you also take legendaries that further increase the damage of the abilities. You then have a set bonus that also increases the damage of those abilities, and it's like 2 dots you just need to swap around on multiple targets. And then you stand in the middle and you just maintain those dots and forset on them, and you literally go like 2-3 million DPS in like with minimum effort.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I think Shadow Priests always fought with Blizzard about is the cross-dotting nature. And it was a thing for them before where it was just really easy for them to turret and just, you know, just VT Shadowward Pain, VT Shadowward Pain, VT Shadowward Pain on everything. And Affliction does that now with Agony Corruption. Just way better. So every expansion, I think, Warlocks get just under fire for one spec just pulling way ahead.
I think personally a lot of it comes down to them removing Malefic Grasp, which used to be a passive ability that we just had baseline, and it made it really easy to balance a single target because it made it so that your filler just dealt a percentage of your dot's damage every time it ticked. And they removed that, and what you saw is that now we spend like 2/3 of a fight hitting Drain Soul, and it only does like 15% of our damage. The vast majority of our damage is just from Siphon Life, Agony, and Corruption. So it's just, they can't, even if they tried to balance the current state of Affliction, they just couldn't because our filler is so weak.
Right. Now, the flip side of that, which not gets to talk about this apparently, because that's what we decided at the beginning of the show, is the completely reworked for the umpteenth time demonology. So how has the complete, it's a third rework, I guess second full rework of demonology worked out in Legion so far? Not, you take the reins on this one. I'm just gonna sit back.
Yeah, Demo went from being a one spec fight or a one spec to another one spec with the introduction of the like enhanced artifact, and yeah, it was pretty much went from being a spec that was enjoyable to play to one that gives you carpal tunnel and makes you feel like you're playing a Fury Warrior.
Now expound upon that, because you brought that up the other day, but what does that feel like? Like, what's the, just walk me through the methodology of playing demonology right now.
The methodology is you press one button, and then you press another button, and then you spend all your shards, and then you continue pressing those two primary buttons until your face bleeds. That's realistically the best way to do it, and like it was dubbed the meme build, the meme spec, when like it first kind of came about for a reason, because you're literally just memeing yourself playing the spec with two buttons, and super engaging.
It has the potential to be this master summoner, not necromancer-esque, but at least that's what they kind of want. It's just definitely not there now.
No,
so,
not even a little bit.
So what does it need? This is your billboard moment, right? What does demonology need? Because I'm not gonna, my way I've summed up demonology before is that it's a worse affliction because your dots that you cast are just animated instead of being a debuff square, right? But it's the same thing. So what does Demonology need?
The ability to actually multi-dot properly, and Doom either being back to 60 seconds or like being completely reworked or removed completely. Because right now, like you said, it's basically Affliction with fancy dots, and which is a completely fair statement. But those fancy dots are also limited to one single target. Like both Wild Imps and Dreadstalkers are locked into the target that you cast them on. So it makes AoE or even two target extremely difficult, to the point where it's not even worth playing anymore.
Right. It's very turrety. It's very, you can focus one thing and rail all of your demons into it. But then outside of that, because Demon Wrath is still garbage.
Yeah, in terms of damage, it's absolutely garbage because the damage of itself is very bad in the overall scheme of things. But the benefit that you gain from actually casting it, sure, you get a shitload of shards, but those shards in turn just go into one target. You don't really have the ability to put them into multiple targets without specking Dark Glare, and even that is like questionable at best, because then you're suffering in terms of single target if it's an actual single target fight. So you're very, very limited.
Okay. What other suggestions are out there to throw on the dartboard for what Demonology should? Because again, we're not going to talk about Battle for Azeroth here, but in the first huge alpha poll, there's nothing so far. So, and I know you guys are hoping for this, but what else does it need to happen? Gahddo or Loozy, you guys have anything else you want to add?
DE needs to be removed. It's just demonic empowerment is. People have been complaining about it since alpha.
There it
Pretty
is.
much everyone universally agreed that just giving us a random maintenance buff for no real reason is just not really fun gameplay. Just literally any time that you summon a pet, hit this button and the pet does more damage. It's just there's no thought that goes into it. It's not fun to do.
There used to be some thought when it only buffed like 3 demons, but even that at this point would be kind of not great, because you would still just go, okay, summon 2 dogs, great, push the button. Summon your Doomguard, press the button. So it's still like very not great, even with that in mind.
Yeah, but this needs to become just their mastery. Just demonic empowerment should just be your flat, like all of your summoned minions do more damage. That sounds like that's like beast mastery
already.
Yeah, to be fair,
right? But
our mastery is when you have DE on a pet, it does more damage. That
so
right.
Very, very, very great button to press.
Yeah, demonic empowerment also increases the damage of your demons by another amount, and then of course demonic empowerment increases the haste, health, and damage of your pets by an amount. So it's like you have a passive, crappy version of it that then adds to the actual. Yeah, that needs to be cleaned up. So hopefully, yeah.
And just
Demo's in a great space right now.
The only other thing that I would like to like reiterate from what Not said is that Doom is one of the worst mechanics in the entire game. It's just so bad. You literally cannot play Demo without like having weak auras that tell you when Doom is gonna tick, because otherwise there's just no way. There's no indication of when it's going to tick, and every time it ticks, you get a soul shard. So you need to like.
They said that you didn't need weak auras to play Demo anymore. That's the reason that they did this rework, is so that you didn't need to have weak auras or add-ons to help you.
Yeah, that was some of the thought behind the huge nerf, like you said, with the famous Eon. We don't want you to play this spec because you can either go to this one website and be misled, or you can go to another website and read like a huge wall of text and not learn anything. So they wanted to like nerf it so you couldn't play it, and then rework the spec, resulting in another spec that also needed a lot of add-ons and a lot of work to actually, a lot of knowledge to how to play.
So the issue, I'll bring up the tooltip for Doom on screen for those that don't know what this is, and by default it doesn't read as anything too ridiculous, right? So it's just a dot sort of that inflicts impending doom on the target, causing a % of your spell power damage after 20 seconds. But that would be great if you cast it once and then it ticks at 20 seconds later and deals its damage. But obviously that's not a perfect world because you'll be refreshing it and pandemicking it and adding duration. But that doesn't move the time at which it ticks, which then becomes completely kerfuffled as a fight or any encounter rolls forward. So it doesn't tick every 20 seconds, at least directly. Depends on when you refresh it, depends on when you've moved, depends on when you buff it in the first place. You've got multiple targets that are all going to be, you know, dooming at different times. Hence the reason why you guys talk about these weak auras. You have to know when it's going to happen. Yeah.
And the honest truth, it's like the easiest thing in the entire game to fix, to change it from one of the worst spells to just a good spell. And it's just make it so that it no longer generates a shard and just make it do a ton more damage. And that's just fine. It'll just, like any other dot, it just ticks, it does a lot of damage, you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, chat brings up, does Doom actually tick? I thought mobs die before it does.
It does tick if you spec into Impending Doom and have Bloodlust, and your Dooms are 6 seconds long or shorter, and then you want to kill yourself refreshing Doom every 6 seconds, or...
It's an awkward spell for sure. So those are the dartboard hits for Demonology. Loozy.
Yes.
So first off, well, I guess this is not has to put the pin in this and the moratorium on something at the same time. Green fire or red fire for destruction warlocks?
I mean, there's no discussion. Green fire. If you have red fire, don't know what you're doing, you need to like go do the quest line. It's very easy now. Get green fire and then you can start playing.
So you heard that, right? Before you
I
can
feel like
start
that wrapped it
playing.
up pretty nicely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Do you have anything to add to that though? Not? Is there like a bot that scans all the warlocks in Discord coming that if you're not using green fire, you're gonna get banned, right? I heard about this. This is true?
No, it's actually not true at all.
Oh, okay.
That should be a thing, though. Like, if that was a thing, definitely implemented.
Yeah. But how did Legion change how many times you cast Chaos Bolt? Because you technically have Embers back now. So walk me through Destruction, Loozy.
Well, basically, going from HFC, the last tier, like the very last day of Warlocks of Draenor, you were playing Charred Remains, which was a talent that increased your Ember generation and made your stuff hit less, your Incinerates hit less, and then your Chaos Bolts hit more. And they like kind of reworked Destruction. I think they pretty much reworked it like completely. Because the way it then started working is that soul shards instead of embers was now a resource, and soul shards were generated through immolate, ticks, and conflagrates. So you couldn't farm resources the same way you used to be able to. There was a legendary, the belt legendary, which was like you needed it to play destruction pretty much to like do good damage. That made it a lot more smooth because you got a lot more shards. So it basically made it so that you couldn't reliably like build up and then spend and then build up and then spend, because you had 5 soul shards and each chaos bolt took 2 soul shards. So you could basically chaos bolt twice, and you didn't want to go to 5 soul shards because then you'd risk losing a soul shard overall. Because if you had like a lucky immolate tick that procced it, so it was kind of destruction was kind of awkward to play. I think it was like one of the best performing specs. We got Wreak Havoc, which was like the craziest thing. It basically, like you talented it made your Havoc be like a permanent thing. Last 20 seconds, no cooldown, and it duplicated everything except your portals. So you could literally, by going that talent, you just effectively doubled your damage. Which was a lot of what Destruction's power was that.
Yeah, that's what I had on here as a bullet point, is if Destruction is too reliant on Havoc fights, which are 2 targets predominantly, right? So the phase 1 of Odin, for example, when you're just sitting in the middle and you have Havoc on one, just both targets, right? But if you can't do that, that can be a niche, or a niche, or however you want to pronounce it, YouTube comments. that that works really well for destruction. But if you can't do that, then it feels like Enhancement Shaman an expansion ago, where if I couldn't Fire Nova, I was garbage damage. But if I could, it was great. So that's still like the main problem with destruction, or is it just the mechanics of building and spending right now, or?
Not as much as it used to be. Like I said, they changed Wreak Havoc now, and I'll like get into with the Soul Shard change as well. So like you said, with Odin, for example, in Trial of Valor, a lot of the strength of destruction was the ability to effectively double your damage. So if there was 2 targets, you didn't actually lose any damage. You could just keep on, going your single target rotation on 2 targets, and you do like insane amounts of damage.
Mm-hmm.
And there are very few fights where there's only 1 target. Like stuff like Guam, for example, destruction wasn't a very great spec, because it was like 1 target only, or single target wasn't quite as strong. But going into Tomb of Sagaras, they kind of changed it, because they basically gave us Burning Embers back. So where before you could only generate soul shards with either the legendary immolate ticks or conflict rage, you could now farm up your resources. So you could you decide when you wanna do damage, if you wanna like pool embers or soul shards for an ad, for a mechanic. You can kind of play around that, and I feel like destruction was kind of weak at that with the 5 soul shard and kind of RNG generate of the resource.
Yeah, what's the math behind that now? Because I'll bring up the tooltips, right? So Immolate's periodic damage generates 1 soul shard fragment and a 50% chance to generate additional 1 on a crit. And then Conflagrate does 5 soul shard fragments. So how many fragments is a soul shard?
You need 10 soul fragments for a soul shard.
Okay.
And so and basically when you havoc and you conflagrate, like your stuff, I think all of your abilities do twice as much generation when it's on 2 targets. So if you have like, if there's another target, you havoc that, you conflagrate, you get 1 full soul shard, because it's 5 + 5 soul shard bits. So that also, like, they changed havoc around, so you can't havoc as much as you used to be able to. And it basically, it made us not that far ahead on 2 targets, but we can also do single target. So overall, I mean, it's definitely a trade I would do.
Okay.
Because destruction is playable in, I feel like, basically every situation. Like changing talents around, making you able to do some AoE damage, cleave damage, single target. Overall, I feel like I was very happy about the change, because it made it a lot closer to Mist of Pandaria destruction, which was, in my opinion, and I know a lot of other people's opinion, was like the perfect destruction. Like it was really good.
So what does destruction need to get some of that feel back then, if that was like the pinnacle of it? Is it getting closer to it now? Like what kind of TLC, which stands for Tender Living Care, does destruction need to feel that way? Because this rounds us up into the Warlock roundtable right here, right? The best or the worst between all 3 of these. So what does destruction need? Kind of like we had all those darts to throw for demonology, right? So what are your suggestions, Loozy?
Well, I personally, like, my favorite spec has been destruction. Like, I think always. Obviously, Siege of Orgrimmar Affliction was broken to the point where if you didn't love it or didn't want to play it, like, there was something wrong, because it was just with snapshotting and soul swap, like. But through the entire thing, like, destruction has been my go-to. I played destruction through Emerald Nightmare, TOV, Nighthold, Tomb of Sagaras. I didn't play destruction in Antorus, because Affliction, like Gahddo said, Affliction is just too good. But I feel like the only thing that destruction actually needs, I'm sure they have other thoughts, is the, tiny bit more damage maybe. I feel like the play style is good. I like it. Them changing, like I said, I'd make the trade going from the perma havoc into a bit more single targets. You can play it on single target. You can play it on cleave. You know, it's strong in both situations. You have a few legendaries you can swap around. If you want to go Mythic Plus, if you want to do like bursty AoE, if you want like full single target. I feel like there's a lot of situations Destruction works. Because I'm sure Gahddo probably has like some trick up his sleeve to say like Destruction needs this, and then they'll be better.
I have a few.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Because the only thing that I was wondering about was that did your mastery work out after they sort of tweaked it a little bit to not be a huge problem? Because earlier on in Legion, it was just like the dumbest thing.
The Legion mastery for Destruction was like, I don't even... Like, I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure I remember correctly. Like, in HFC, it was like kind of the same thing without the between X and X amount of damage thing.
From the start of the expansion, it was completely random.
Yeah,
you could either roll 0% damage increase or the max damage increase, and it averaged to the middle. And then I think it was in TOS when they did the small Destro rework that they moved half of the value of mastery to just passive. You always do this amount more. So they sort of cut the RNG in half. And it was one of those things before then where it was like always numerically correct, but most people just never used it before TOS because it was just a very unenjoyable experience when you needed to like burst and add on Cenarius and then your Chaos Bolt decided to roll a 0 out of 60.
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest thing too, is because Chaos Bolt's damage range is massive, and adding any type of multiplicative backend to it is going to have huge swings. You could throw 2 Chaos Bolts, one for 250,000 and one for 1 million, right? It's like, okay, sure, why not? Which is, it's fun and fantasy-like, but at the same time, when you're playing it, you're just like, that isn't, what? You have no control over it.
Very chaotic.
Oh, like, come on!
Mastery.
Class fantasy. We brought it back full circle. Ladies, Legion in a nutshell.
Stop it. Just don't do that.
I have like a few bullet points that I think that they're all quality of life things, right? That I think that Destruction needs to make it like as enjoyable of a spec as it was in MoP.
Okay.
But I wanted to just touch on what Loozy said earlier is really true. Like, Affliction is clearly the best spec in the game, and it's just broken and stupid, and you should play it, right? If you want to optimize your stuff, you should be playing Affliction on every fight. But you look at most of the fights, and Destruction's, like, upper middle of the pack. It's not like it's a bad spec. It's just not Affliction. And even on some fights like Dogs, it can rival Affliction because it's 2 targets, but, you know. So I think, like, if they had just unnerfed the nerf that they gave Destruction unjustly in Tomb of Sargeras, which was a bit of a soapbox for me, but at the start of TOS there were a lot of burst, parse, like 2-minute speed kills, so they nerfed Destruction because it had really good burst, and then it kind of just sucked for the rest of the tier, and they never undid those nerfs. If they just undid that, I think it would beat Affliction on at least like 2 or 3 fights. Like I would legitimately be playing it on like Argus right now. So if you like Destro, it plays really well right now, and you can beat probably everyone in your raid playing it anyway if you play it well. But the 2 main points are like the Chaos Bolt thing. At the start of the expansion, 2 shards out of 5 made sense, right? Because Conflict Rate generated 1 shard, Emulate generated 1 shard. It was slower than it is now. Whereas when they made it more smooth, the resource generation increased a lot. So you can't really pull at all anymore. You kind of just hit Chaos Bolt constantly because you just have tons of shards right now. And it doesn't feel good at 2 and 5 shards with the current resource generation. And there are 2 different ways they could fix that. They can either just make it hit harder and give us less resources, right? They can just lower the amount that our spells give and make Chaos Bolt hit harder. Or they can just keep the damage where it is, or probably realistically cut the damage and reduce the cost to 1 shard. And either of those things would make the spec feel a lot better than it is right now. And that's like the only thing really that I have an issue with Destruction right now. Is just they kind of changed it mid-expansion, but not all of the way that they needed to change it to make it feel cohesive.
Right. Yeah, Terran even chimes in with lower other damage and increased Chaos Bolts damage. Something like that.
A lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah. There's always a back and forth on like what major button or what's your big class spell that should be doing the utmost amount of your damage, right? Which always comes back to different little anecdotal parts of, you know, well, like Prot Warrior comes to mind, where like 40% of their damage sometimes is a passive, right? Deep Wounds, which doesn't necessarily feel very engaging for the Prot Warrior, that if they're timing their abilities properly, and this goes for any DPS too, like their core spell isn't what really contributes to their overall performance. Like so much comes from an Affliction can have the adverse of this, where you put your 2 dots up, one lasts forever, and it does 30% of your damage, or whatever huge percentage, like this huge swing. So that's fine for that, but other specs, I get it. So yeah, the round table we're still in right now, I guess the days of the tanky caster are sort of there. Affliction definitely has it now. The note I had on that was, do you think that Drain Soul and Drain Life are staying combined in battle?
Oh, well, no, we already know that they aren't. They we got a lot of the stuff that they're changing. Affliction got a small rework, and we got a lot of the stuff that they wanted to change in the initial beta pass, whereas Demo just didn't get anything at all. But we know for a fact that Drain Soul is being replaced by Shadow Bolt next expansion for Affliction, so we're back to like sort of a Cataclysm playstyle where you're spamming some Shadow Bolts. But yeah, I think the devs realized how broken Affliction's self-healing was this tier specifically, or probably last tier. And it might be a hot take, but I personally feel like they've designed most of the fights in Antorus around Affliction existing. Like, you look at almost every fight, and if you stand in anything, it just one-shots you. Sure. And I think that's largely because Affliction would otherwise just AFK standing in every mechanic on every fight, right? And you also see things like bosses, when they phase, they go immune, which wasn't a thing in previous tiers. Any bosses that rotate out of the playing field used to take damage, and it was a way to, you know, if you cast a dot on that, it wouldn't punish you if it rotated out immediately. That dot would still deal the damage. But Corruption being permanent made it so that Affliction just had permanent dots ticking on bosses that weren't there. So Affliction's definitely getting knocked way back for the self-healing. But it matters how they handle Destruction and Demonology, because those two specs are still they're like as tanky as Affliction, but in different ways. Each Warlock spec has a different way that they reduce the damage that healers have to heal on them, right? So Demonology passively splits damage with its pet, right? And the pet just heals itself when it deals damage, and you deal damage. So Demonology just always takes a flat % less damage than all of the other specs. And Destruction's Mastery has a baked-in damage reduction. So Destruction's Mastery just makes them take less damage as well.
Right.
So it's like Warlocks are still probably going to be like the tanky class, but you're not going to see Affliction on Kingaroth on Mythic just on a robot by itself with no healers keeping itself alive.
Or standing in the Dark Storm on Coven. Yeah. Stuff like that. That's fair.
What do you mean for Affliction, Warlock, and Plus?
Oh,
yeah, it's totally balanced.
Tank and 4 Affliction Warlocks. Yeah.
Yep.
1 8 Afflux, 2 Blood Death Knights, doing Heroic Antorus, no problem.
I want to see that before the expansion leaves,
fair,
though.
It's already been done.
To be fair, we've seen 5 Affliction Warlocks do like Hall's 20 keys, so...
Yeah.
That's already... That's really?
Yeah,
I think that they might have had like a tank for ball. I don't remember, but I know at some point it was either 4 or 5 Warlocks did an HOV 20. It was just like, maybe this isn't okay, guys.
Yeah, maybe. So there was.
But really,
go ahead,
what
yeah.
we're talking about is demonology going back to being a tank spec. This is a common theme that comes up every single expansion. Why should we have 3 DPS specs when we could have 1 tank spec and 2 DPS?
Yeah,
man.
I've heard you guys bring this. People still want enhancement to be a tank spec for whatever reason. I'm not gonna play a tank. Chat, YouTube comments, stop it. Enhancement's not gonna be a tank spec. Just because we had shield specialization in vanilla, that was a PvP thing. Just stop it. But
yeah,
there was one tagline I have on here. I mean, we're good for time for this whole section, but so I put like down what really makes Warlocks different from mages now, because you have a planned reverse blink, you have portal, which portal is way too good for so many reasons, and they just talk about battle. They're going to be doing like the rejigging of classes to all have like a niche, which then goes back to their reverse problem of bring the actual class, not the player. So we'll see how that works out. But
I think like a lot of the reason that demonic portal and healthstones are so powerful compared to a lot of specs utility,
right,
largely comes down to just the fact that we're the only pure that doesn't have an immunity. And immunities are, as we saw throughout all of this expansion, pretty much the only raid utility that actually matters a lot of the time. So
I mean, there is a reason I was playing mage on Argus Progress and not Warlock. Yeah.
And there's a reason that you didn't see a lot of Warlocks in TOS, even though they were really kind of broken too. It's because we don't have an immunity, so out of luck. But I feel like we differ from mages in a lot of ways. Mages are a lot more like demonology in a way. Like they just kind of turret and hit one button a lot of the fight. All of the mage specs are really similar in that sense.
Sure.
They spend a majority of their time just hitting that one button and then reacting to procs.
Yeah.
And they function mechanically in different ways, right? Because like we're multi-dotters, whereas you have like fire that has the passive ignite spreading mechanic that's like completely unique to that spec. You have Ice Lance, which is just like auto cleave. It's like baked in havoc. So, I don't know.
Sounds like mage is more like warlock.
No, don't say that. Oh,
I mean,
it's too late. It's already been said.
oh gosh.
Mages suck.
I didn't say that.
Well, the comment was it's the only pure DPS spec but doesn't have an immunity, because hunters have Dieter or Turtle now. It's still deterrence. All right, Blizzard, calm down. It's also commanding. It's not. It's commanding shout, not rallying cry. It's recklessness, not battle. Stop it. It's blessing of protection, not hand. Just stop it. Rename all these things in battle, please. But yeah, it's because mages have block. Hunters have Dieter, double block, yeah, and then rogues have 17 other defensive cooldowns. So warlocks have.
But we have shield wall and lots of healing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Our thing this expansion has been we get to stand in things and our portal is still overpowered, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. But anything else from this section of the show? Or are we good to move forward into some sticky stuff, I guess, after the mid-show break? We all good? Anything else you want to add? Looks good to me. I'll take the nods as confirmation. But anyway, if you want more of this show, or if you've missed any of this show leading up to this point, of course, all the shows do get archived onto the YouTube page. They're all right here. They're all by years. I haven't updated my front page in a little while, actually, but if you've missed the Rogue show or Word Up and Jack were on a little while ago about parsing versus performance, these are all right there. You can go check the playlist for the years that the shows come out. They're all right there if you want to go back to the Method World first for Mythic Argus, etc., or the end of year specials we just had recently. They're all posted by year, as well as the audio-only versions of the show go up on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play Music, as well as the RSS feed on FinalBoss.tv, the website. But there are more podcasts beyond that. If you want to support the show in a more monetary fashion, there is the Twitch button up there. There's the red one for YouTube down there somewhere. I don't know where it is. Or there's the Patreon page where you get to double up. There are currently 34 more podcasts. They're either in the after show variety or the pre-show sort of meet and greet, where we just talk about the notes and go over things and him and haw about whatnot. But this is the Warlock one, so you can go check that out if you'd like, or if you want to go into the debacle, if you don't know what happened with Ask Mr. Robot recently, you can go to the Rogue one. So these are for the people that are going to support the show a little extra mile. You can follow along with the show notes as well. And it was an 1.5 hour long private stream Q&A that I did just the other day that was about the behind the scenes working of the show and that kind of stuff, getting a lot of feedback from you guys. So you can go check that out on the show's Patreon page. That it's a necessary evil in a way, because there's literally no ad revenue to make on YouTube anymore unless I make this my full-time gig only for YouTube and make 12 videos a week, which that's what? But also, Terramaya, Chaos, Jason, Taislin, Screws Loose, Mia, R4 Truffles, and Drewish. Thank you for your continued support in a ridiculously nerdy way. That's just really way too generous of you guys. Or if you want to eat something and support the show and keep me sitting here doing these throughout the next expansion and beyond, then you can check out the affiliate link down below for Daily Harvest. I'm not going to plug this over the top, but there are smoothies, parfaits, sundaes, overnight oats, a whole bunch of things. Soups, there's a new thing. Oh, this I've done this like the last couple of, I'm not even kidding. The soup is way too good. And that's just one way to help support the show and keep it working. It's how it works nowadays, right? That's how this stuff gets made, okay? That's how I keep interviewing nerds, so you can keep putting them in your ear holes or your eye holes. I don't know what you do with it. Just don't be weird, all right? YouTube comments, just calm down. It's all right. It's okay. But use the code FinalBossTV, just the name of the show, on Daily Harvest, and you can get half off your first normal order. It's 3 free cups, basically 50% off the first order of 6. So you can do that with whatever order you'd like. But we're gonna go over, let me bring up the talents here, get this up here, and we'll kind of give you guys a little bit of a guide section, but this is to preface the following section. And I want to go over the cookie cutter specs of the Warlocks that are currently being used. And again, if you need more about relics, artifact combinations, whatever, go to the Lock one-stop shop for that. However, let's do demonology and destruction first. Let's sort of flip it back around. Loozy, you want to walk me through what destruction Warlocks are sort of stuck into now in Legion, talent-wise?
Sure. I mean, we went through, I'm not actually sure. I think it was like after Emerald Nightmare, where they swapped Eradication and Cataclysm and Fire and Brimstone. Like, they swapped some of that around.
Mm-hmm.
So we were playing one thing before where we played both Reverse Entropy and Eradication together, which was, it just felt really good to play because your Chaos Bolt is like really fast to cast. But since then, we've pretty much been playing the same spec, talent-wise, and then with swapping out 1, maybe 2 talents for either cleave or AoE. So the cookie cutter, if you want to call it that, spec for destruction right now is that you, in the first row, you go backdraft. You used to, I know Gahddo is gonna promote Shadowburn because he was talking about Shadowburn for a long time and how Shadowburn was actually not partially that far behind.
Look, man, it was good in Nighthold, okay? It's not good anymore.
You go backdraft. You used to be able to play Roaring Blaze as well, but it's very annoying to play. It's not very fun at all to play.
It hasn't been fun since it was ridiculously broken and all the Warlocks could stack it.
When it was that, and then the stealth nerf with not announcing anything, going from, I think it was like 65% down to 25%.
Ooh, yeah.
From like that nothing was set. It was just all of a sudden someone noticed like, hey, this used to say 65%. So that was some good memes. But we go backdraft. Then in the second tier, we on single target, we go eradication. On I think it's 3 or more targets, and can't remember the number in my head. I haven't played destruction for a long time. We go empowered life tap, but basically eradication is like the go-to. It's also kind of what determines your rotation, because you want to maintain eradication on your target.
Side note, I need to put this out there just because I did so much testing back in beta. The fact that empowered life tap was the fix and not mana tap.
Mana tap.
Thank the glob above us, because that was the dumbest thing.
Mana tap, like balancing life tap, mana tap, while still maintaining your rotation and having other resources to actually cast stuff. Was
no, thank you.
I know Not was playing mana tap as like the only person in the world on his.
It was great.
It was not great.
I love doing
just for the record. That did make it live bay. We had that until I think TOS.
Right.
It was up there during. I think it was actually, wasn't it like simming higher in some situations as well? But it was like unanimous vote. We said, okay, we're going reverse entropy instead, because that is not happening. We're not playing mana tap.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and eradication didn't used to be in that row. It used to be in the tier 60 row on Cataclysm's spot. So you could play both reverse entropy and eradication together, which was really good. Then in the 45 tier, as Gahddo said, demonic circle. Like,
of course.
You know, you play that, obviously.
Hopefully, I'm with you on this, Warlocks. Just throw this out there for a little bit of my understanding of all the specs because of the testing I did. Demonic Circle should be baseline. I hear you, and I hope.
Yeah, definitely.
This is dumb as a talent. This is so dumb.
Please make it 2 spells again.
Choose between your only mobility and utility.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, it should be 2 spells and not a talent.
Baseline.
What are you talking about? It is 2 spells. You just have to make a macro for one.
Stop. You just
make a macro for this, and then there's 2 spells. You know, do it yourself.
Yeah.
Don't ever really go Mortal Coil only in PvP. You can go Shadow Fury if you need a stun and don't need mobility, I guess. In the next row, I don't like situationally you can go Cataclysm. I don't think there's like any place I'd actually take Cataclysm right now. If you want to cleave AoE more than like 3-4 targets, you go Fire and Brimstone. If not, you play Soul Harvest. Soul Harvest, Dark Soul, please make it baseline. Don't make it a talent and call it something else. Like, it's Dark Soul. Don't like.
Right.
It's basically Dark Soul with like they reduce duration, and then you can like immolate to get more duration on it. When you pop it, it's not very fun compared to what it used to be, in my opinion. Then the 75 one, either you can shield yourself or you can slowly kill yourself, but get movement speed.
But yeah,
so obviously Burning Rush in that, because who wants to play a wheelchair? Like, if you need it, if it's like high Mythic Plus or a fight where you need a lot of healing, you take a lot of damage, you can either go Demon Skin or Dark Pact depending on the situation. But I don't think I've ever actually spec'd out of Burning Rush for any fight, because you don't really need it. You have Soul Leech already as a shield. You have your Unending Resolve on a 1-minute CD. You don't need more tankiness.
Yep.
The tier 90 tier thing, talents. I know technically Supremacy, I think Sim's higher still.
Yeah.
Sacrifice, thank God we're getting the old Sacrifice back. Because Sacrifice right now isn't very fun to play around. You can play it in I think like Mythic Plus or maybe on Aeonar. It's better. But you pretty much always go service, just because it really lines up well with everything. You can have a interrupt, dispel, whatever, save it for a priority target, and you can have some extra damage on that if you want. But overall, I don't think I've ever spec'd out of service outside like Mythic Plus and some AoE whoring I did on like heroic Il'gynoth or something.
Nice, nice.
Yeah, and then you
There,
kind of.
there was one place, and that was on Elisand, so that you could proc Cephas off interrupting.
Oh my god, yes. But you also played Shadowburn on Elisand, so.
Yeah, fight me.
So in the last year, Havoc was reworked. Wreak Havoc was reworked. It used to just remove the cooldown and make it a 20-second duration, so you could basically have Wreak Havoc up or Havoc on a target 100% of the time. Now it just reduces the cooldown of Havoc with 20 seconds.
Yep.
So it just makes it on like more targets stronger. I think. I mean, Gahddo has to correct me here. I think you played on 2-3 targets. I'm not sure on 4 targets.
Somewhere around 3 or 4. You just switch
Yeah,
to Soul Conduit.
it's around there. But basically, Wreak Havoc for cleave, Channel Demon Fire for single target, and you could play Soul Conduit for
memes. You can play Soul
for
Conduit
memes. Yes.
You can play it so that you can spam Rain of Fire in Mythic Plus.
In
yeah, okay.
Though, in Nighthold, we also touched a bit on this earlier in the podcast. You could play Soul Conduit, Eradication, Soul Harvest, and this was before the Soul Shard rework. So you could play like a meme spec that just relied on sustaining yourself with like procs, Soul Conduit procs, legendary conflict raids, that stuff, and just maintaining Eradication on a target. And it wasn't very fun if you were hit by any mechanic or have to move.
Yeah.
It was a giant DPS loss. But right now you go Channel Demon Fire single target and Wreak Havoc on cleave.
Is the balancing of Channel Demon Fire better than it used to be? I know I brought this up on the first Warlock show, is that its spell power coefficient is very...
The reason that it's so low is because it ticks an unimaginable amount of times in that little period. It sends out tons of bolts. I don't remember the exact number. I think it might be like 15.
15 over 3
15,
seconds. Yeah.
But you can also Havoc it.
But it's a relatively short cooldown, and the reason that it's good is it replaces Incinerate in the rotation, right? So all that it has to do is just do more damage than Incinerate, right? Because if you think about it, like, you would spend that GCD hitting Incinerate anyway. So it's really just, it does a lot more damage than an Incinerate does. So it's a pretty good talent. And it's like 2% ahead or so. Soul Conduit kind of depends on your legendaries, but before like TOS, it was in a place where you just always played like Soul Conduit pretty much because CDF was not even numerically better. And why are you going to use an active talent if it's not better, right?
Right.
But now most people use it because it's not too bad to play with, and it's decent DPS gain.
Okay. It looks fun too. That's why it's the blight of many active abilities in the game that they just get so overshown by passives all the time. It's unfortunate because the actives have spell modifiers or effects or graphics to them, and then they're just not as good as just this does more, and you have a chance to do that, and it just happens on your character, nothing. So that's at least good to know. Good to hear. But at least there was some wiggle room with destruction there a little bit, which is also good because next up, not.
Hi.
You want to walk me through demonology?
How long do you have? Because it's going to take about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, go. I feel bad.
It'll take a bit longer than 30 seconds. Like, for the most part, like, there's one cookie cutter spec that is the only spec you're basically ever going to play.
Sure.
So you're always going to be picking Shatter Inspiration, Shadow Flame, and Demonic Calling have just kind of fallen out. As unfortunate as it is, because the rotation, at least with Demonic Calling, is much more fluid and actually like enjoyable to play.
Yeah.
So you're always going to pick Shatter Inspiration. You're always going to pick Improved Dreadstalkers. Implosion is just completely dead in the water. Impending Doom does have its place on like 2+ targets, but for the most part, you're just pigeonholing yourself into single targets, since you can either do one thing really, really well, or you can do like 1.5 things only kind of sort of okay. So you're basically always going to be playing Improved Dreadstalkers, Demonic Circle, obviously. It's the only talent that's even
baseline
in that tier. For level 60, there was some contention between Hand of Doom at one point and then Power Trip. But then Thalkil's Ascendance came into the game, and Power Trip was just like, hey, you remember me? I'm the only thing that matters now, because you just want to get as many soul shards out of your system as possible, and Power Trips brings in the most, so you need to get rid of all of it as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Soul Harvest, I don't think has ever been a thing ever in the entire expansion, actually.
For Demonology, yeah.
Yeah, for Demonology.
You could play it on Odin. Doom on the
Okay.
ad.
dot.
If you
Look,
don't
it was
play Destruction on Odin, like, I don't know.
Fight me. I was #1 on the ad. Okay.
All right. You probably played also Dark Glare also at that point, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did the full meme build on Odin, man.
Of course. But yeah, Soul Harvest has basically been unplayable for the entire expansion. The 75 tier is also fairly linear. You just want movement and movement forever, because you don't care about incoming damage.
Yep.
It's more better. It's just better to have the movement period in every situation. For the 90 tier, as much as everyone would love to have Supremacy as the best talent, it unfortunately is not. Well, fortunately is not, because Supremacy is very boring. Supremacy or Service is always going to be the go-to option there. Synergy used to be really good, and then they kind of gutted it, and that was also kind of sad, because you got to have very cool Thalkil consumptions.
I've always thought it was weird, ever since beta for Legion, that Demonology didn't just, that there wasn't like one grimoire that was passive for the 3 that was their better one, because Supremacy makes the most sense, because why doesn't the Demonology Warlock just get the more powerful passive demon all the time? The grimoire tier is just strange in that sense.
That.
If you hover over Grimoire of Supremacy on a talent calculator, you'll probably see a note that says -20% damage.
Not on the WoWDB one, but
well, on Wowhead there's a hidden 20% damage reduction on Grimoire of Supremacy specifically for Demo.
What?
Because if it didn't have that, it would just be like 5% better than every other talent in that row always.
Yep. So they
didn't ever put that on a tooltip.
And I think they wanted to have it at some point with Supremacy being really good, because then it would be like, feel really cool, be like, hey, have this bigger demon out, cool, it's the best one. But they just didn't, and yeah, you're just pigeonholed into Service forever now. So.
Sometimes I hear about these like hidden, what the math and theory crafters find that are, because that was a thing for Enhancement Shaman before. We had a modifier on Elemental Blast last expansion that made it just dead. It just did half damage for enhancement for some reason. For PvP balance, probably.
There are like a lot of those in Warlock.
That's awful. I feel bad. All right, what's the last tier?
Last year, you're always going to be playing Soul Conduit. Again, it's all about shard value, because you want to get Thalkil Ascendance out as much as possible, and that just gives you more shards to do that with. Dark Glare, from what I remember, is like about equal on 2 targets of Soul Conduit, and then finally starts becoming better at 3+ targets, but it's still not like vastly better. And Demon Bolt is just completely dead in the water. There's absolutely zero value in playing Demon Bolt.
It was so good early in the expansion, and then just ruined its coefficient, didn't they?
They did that, and also introduced Thalkil's Ascendance. Which is the real killer for it. So.
Well,
right.
The reason that people stopped playing it was actually when they nerfed Grimoire of Supremacy. A lot of the value in Demon Bolt early in the expansion was just that you had that 40% damage buff up a lot on yourself, so you doing more damage meant that Demon Bolt was better. And when they lowered that to 25, it just kind of, never play that again.
Right. I'm just going to bring this up on stream just so people know what we're talking about when he says that Thalkeel's Ascendance is that your demonic empowerment has a 50% chance to enrage Thalkeel, causing each of your pets to deal additional shadow damage to the current target, which is what you're talking about, how this spec is just spam demonic empowerment, basically. Yep. Okay.
Yep. That's what causes the empowerment spam. Yeah.
Right.
So that's pretty much Demo in a nutshell. There's like a very, 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 very few variants that you play, mainly because you just don't have the option. You're either all in on one thing or you're all in the other thing. There's no middle ground.
Yeah. Like I would like to put, you can do Demo AoE like in high mythic keys, and it'll work out pretty well because in high mythic keys things are alive long enough for Doom to tick, right?
Right.
Yep.
But below that, it's just kind of like if you're just running around doing a daily heroic on a Demo lock, your AoE doesn't exist. So you're better off just killing the boss.
Right.
Which even in raids is the exact same thing. Like, well, there's an ad that's going to spawn, but really, how useful are you going to be on that ad? Like, for example, on Varamathras, sure, the ad is like, high priority, and you're going to one shadow bolt on it, and that's it. Like, it's completely useless.
You just reminded me that at the end of the episode, we need to get on a soapbox about very ads. God,
you can. There are certain specs that deal with Mythic Varamathras ads way better than others, and you can see that when those classes do what they can do to them, but then if they don't, then you struggle and wipe on Mythic Varamathras.
Yeah, well, Affliction and Demo are probably the two worst specs in the game on those ads.
Oh, I agree. I'm with you. Yep.
I legitimately considered at one point switching to Destruction just so that I could hit Conflagrate on them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would work. I mean, it's fire
like
mages.
The DPS didn't matter. Just needed to kill the ads or we wiped.
Yeah. Elemental Shaman's really good. Fire and Frost mages are really good. There's quite a number of things that are really good.
Melee in general.
Well, melee if
you
it's
do the strat.
close enough. Right, yeah.
If you do the stacking.
If you just have them run together, they can go hit them.
Oh, that's... don't... Ooh, that's risky business. Don't... The one melee that...
Shaman,
Right, because the one melee that either lags... It either goes too soon or lags behind. Whatever, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So Gahddo... oh, what?
Time for Affliction, right?
Yeah, so this is apparently the best design spec in the entire game. So hopefully it has tons of talent diversity and like a ton of different options, right? That's how it works.
Okay, look. The talents are well designed. I'm not going to say the spec is extremely well designed.
Okay.
Anyone who's ever played Affliction on Coven can attest how fun it is to sit there hitting Drain Soul for 10 minutes, but the talents are, in my opinion, probably the best designed and balanced talents in the game. Sure. Barring Haunt. Haunt's kind of like the redheaded stepchild. It's
Poor
never
Haunt.
been good. Not once in the entire expansion. I think, like, what was it? Limit Warlocks used it on Mistress because they literally could not play the other talent or they would do too much to the eels.
Right.
So they had to intentionally gimp themselves by picking Haunt. But
right.
So Haunt's the only talent that's just, you're never picking that. It's just bad. Don't ever play Haunt. You have the two main talents that define like the way you play the spec are Writhe and Affliction and Malefic Grasp. They're on our tier 15. You pick Writhe if you need to be extremely mobile, if a fight is just like you have to run around constantly or there are multiple targets for you to dot.
Right.
Just always better in those scenarios. Malefic Grasp is always better on low movement, single target fights. So you have, those are the two cookie cutters, right? You play Writhe for cleave and you play Malefic Grasp for single target, and it's not really a very interactive choice. But in every other tier, you have a significant choice. So like in tier 30, you have Contagion and Absolute Corruption. Absolute Corruption makes your corruption last forever. It's really good on fights like Coven, where you're doing sustained cleave. right? Like you're just dots up all of the time forever. That's the entire fight. It's really good on those fights. Contagion is really good single target, and you can even play it on some cleave fights like Dog, where it can be as good as Absolute Corruption if you play it well, even better. But it's a little harder because you have to juggle more dots. Absolute Corruption, you only really have to keep up Agony, really, and your 4-piece. But with Contagion, you have to keep up 4 dots, Agony, Unstable Affliction, Siphon Life, and Corruption.
Right.
So it's a lot harder to play on 2 targets than Absolute Corruption is, which is why you see most people just recommend you play AC on Fellhounds. But pretty much, if you're dumping a lot of UAs into one dude and you want to do damage to one dude, you pick Contagion. If you're doing lots and lots of cleaving, you pick Absolute Corruption. And ELT is AoE. You primarily see ELT used in Mythic Plus in conjunction with the talent Sow the Seeds, because a majority of your damage is just Seed of Corruption when you pick that talent, and Empowered Life Tap scales that. So in Mythic Plus, you're pretty much either picking ELT or Contagion, usually ELT on most keys. In Raids, you're usually either picking Contagion or Absolute Corruption. I'm not really going to talk about the 45, 75, or 90 because it's literally the exact same thing as Destruction.
Yep.
You can pick Howl of Terror or Mortal Coil if you want to proc Sephuz on some fights like Portal Keeper. You can do stuff like that, just like Shadow Fury. But most of the time, Demonic Circle, Burning Rush, Supremacy, just always those 3. The tier 60, Soul Harvest is usually the default most people play with because it gives you the most control over when you do the damage.
Okay.
But as far as rating goes, it's numerically very similar to Phantom Singularity in basically every scenario. The main difference is like Soul Harvest gives you more boss damage and Phantom Singularity gives you more ad damage, but they're both really good at both of those things. So you can get away with playing either, but mostly people only use Phantom Singularity on Portal Keeper because it lines up very well with the ads. In Mythic Plus, though, Sow the Seeds is a bit of a controversial talent. It essentially triples our AoE DPS.
It also pulls things on an incredibly awkward Z-axis still for some reason.
Well, yeah, nothing to do about that. But...
I don't know why. It's just Seed of Corruption, how it's coded, because who remembers the Kara run where you're pulling a mob pack and then all of a sudden something from below you runs at you from nowhere, and it could be Starfall too, and there was a couple of things expansion that did that, but yeah, even though
the Seeds, it triples your AoE DPS. It's really good in Mythic Plus because a lot of the time in Mythic Plus, all that matters is how much damage you can do to the trash. But even in Mythic Plus, you see a lot of variance between all of the tier 60 talents. They have just different uses. Soul Harvest is good for killing bosses. PS is good if you want to do good boss damage and good AoE. Sow the Seeds, something you're probably always going to pick on like fortified keys. If you need AoE, you're taking that talent. It's probably the most binary choice that Affliction has.
Sure.
And then the 100 tier, which all of the talents are within 1 to 2%.
Wow.
Siphon Life is the current top dog, and that's mostly because our 4-piece buff Siphon Life and doesn't buff UA. So Soul Conduit gives you more UAs. It's good in Mythic Plus where you're spamming Seed of Corruption out a lot. It's mostly not used in raids outside of Mythic Veramathras. On Veramathras, it's better because of the ads. You can drain soul them, you get more shards, which means you have higher value on the refund on Soul Conduit.
Okay.
So you play it on Veramathras Mythic, but outside of that, it's usually always worse than Siphon Life, but it's close enough that if you're a newer player, it's a lot easier to play than Siphon Life. You can just take it and you'll do like 2% less damage, and it won't like ruin your day taking that talent, right? Siphon Life, your default talent for single target, your default talent for 2-target, cleave, fights like dog mostly. And then Death's Embrace, which is our execute that they added mid-expansion, and it's really brokenly good.
Yep.
You'll see that on most of the like cleave fights like Coven, people opt out of Siphon Life because it takes a lot of GCDs to keep Siphon Life up, and it's not like that much better than DE at all, and it gives you that extremely powerful execute on fights like Coven and Agrimar and Argus that you really want. So
Yeah.
any fight where you want execute damage, you can talent DE, but most of the time what you'll see is we have a ring, a legendary ring, our class ring, that gives you Death's Embrace as the talent. So you'll see more often than not, people will opt to play Siphon Life or Soul Conduit and just use that ring. And it works out like you do more damage in the execute using the ring because you get the extra talent, right? But it's about the same overall. It's a little bit weaker than actually talenting DE for overall DPS. But you do, if you're taking DE, you care about the execute anyway, so you should just play for the execute, which is why most people run the ring instead of ever talenting it.
Yeah, and if you're looking at like, because the multiplicative stuff, I always bring this up on certain things too, and why like talent design really works well in certain places. So if you have the ring and you're running like the super dot builds, you also have Siphon Life, and you're running Malefic Grasp, and you're running Contagion, right, for the
Siphon
single target.
Life, that's the main point of contention why a lot of people don't like using the ring in the current tier, and it's because Siphon Life doesn't scale off Death's Embrace at all.
Right, sure.
So when you have the ring on, it lowers the value of Siphon Life a lot, to the point where it's about the same as Soul Conduit a lot of the time. So if you're doing an execute fight, Soul Conduit plus Death's Embrace is usually about the same. It just, Siphon Life is less RNG and it's smoother, so you'll see a lot of people just opt to that still.
Right. It's just, I wanted to bring up the point of all of these stackables that certain specs can do as expansions roll on, or other gear comes into play here, because you talk about how the two different builds of Affliction, and there's a lot of build diversity in this, because you have the cleave, the cross dot, you have the pure single target, where you just stack Malefic Grasp on top of Contagion, on top of Death's Embrace, on top of just UA spam because of Soul Conduit, because and all these things compound to really feel good, versus I've had the same build for like
it feels good numerically, right?
Sure.
You can argue about whether or not Affliction is fun to play, but I think Absolute Corruption is a big issue with why it's not fun to play on Cleave right now, because like in previous expansions you would spend the entire fight just like throwing up dots, and that was it. You cycled dots the entire fight. Maybe you had a few GCDs to throw out some haunts or whatever. Right. And now you just, anytime that's the case, you just talent Absolute Corruption, and then you AFK hitting Drain Soul because Corruption lasts forever, and you only have one dot.
Right.
So, but as far as like cookie cutter raid builds go, there are two ones that you'll primarily see people play. That's Malefic Grasp, Contagion, Soul Harvest, Siphon Life, and that's the single target build. And then Writhe in Agony, Absolute Corruption, Soul Harvest, Death's Embrace, and that's the multi-target dotting build for fights like Dogs and Coven. But there's a lot of variance that you can, there's a lot of leeway in the talents that you can pick on most of the fights, and it won't heavily impact your DPS in any way.
Suddenly,
also, hi Doggo.
Yeah, suddenly dog. Yeah.
Being a baby, sorry.
Aww.
So this brings us to the closing bit of the show, which we can sort of combine all this together, because I think Warlock Hierarchy, this topic that I had built here, sort of, we've already went over it. So if you have questions, now would be the time to sort of weave them in. But because I had like the bad egg of Warlock always seems to keep changing. Like every tier, there's like one bad. Like, is it Destruction that's bad this tier, or Demonology that's bad this tier?
I
like,
think it's this expansion. It's mostly been Demonology. To be
right.
fair. Well, from TOS on, it's been Demonology for the past 2 raids. Before that, Demo was actually good single target, and you played it single target. But
but that is because the other question that we brought up from Discord with which spec has seen the most use, which obviously sounds like Affliction.
Well, it depends on which part of the expansion you're looking at, because like we've said several times, before the mid Nighthold patch, right? At Nighthold launch, it was still fine, and then halfway into Nighthold, they had the patch where they redid a bunch of specs, including Affliction, and Affliction since then has just been completely dominant on pretty much everything, right?
Right.
But before that, it was every single fight pretty much in Emerald Nightmare and TOV, there was a different spec that you could argue is better, right? Mostly Affliction was worse than the other two at that point, and you swap back and forth between Demo and Destro if you wanted Cleaver single target. But so for the first 2.5 raids, it was pretty well balanced. I'd say in Nighthold, the distribution of the specs was probably the best that it was. You could, at the start of Nighthold, you could pretty much play any of the 3 Warlock specs, and you would do respectable damage on most of the fights.
Well, until they introduced the whole souls happening again.
Yeah, we've brought that up a couple times.
Right.
Drastically changing the damage profile of a spec in the middle of the expansion.
Was it like
not the best idea.
The raid was it the Mythic Nighthold patch, like with on the Tuesday that Mythic Nighthold became available? Was it that balance patch, or was it already in?
It was
later on. I think they like reworked like Feral AoE or something, and Affliction and a few other specs, if I remember right. But it, like halfway into Nighthold, when most guilds were like on Elisand or so, I think. Most of the Mythic guilds, I should say. It
was the 715, so it was during Mythic Nighthold. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's totally fine to do. I mean, we knew those are the 0.5 patch's purpose, though. So. Yeah,
it was. Affliction was a very not fun spec to play before that, so they changed it, and then it was too good but more fun. If you look back at the logs from like pre 7.1.5 Nighthold, on pretty much every fight, Demonology was actually top dog a lot of the time, and Affliction wasn't very far behind or beat it some of the time, and Destruction was really, really good on a few fights. So you could get away with playing whatever you wanted, really, and I think that's probably the best state of balance, not necessarily gameplay for Warlocks. But
Northern Man brings up a question about the opportunity or need for Banish, and
Agrimar.
Well, Agrimar now.
The only thing.
Yep.
Mythical Dan also.
Yep.
Well, I guess Mythical Dan too. Yeah.
But I didn't want to bring this up as like only those are a situation, because we sort of brushed over that earlier on in the show, how they're sort of going to find, or they're trying to find in battle, like what each class, I guess, brings as their thing, right?
Yeah.
So, like, Shaman are getting back Tremor Totem, apparently. So, woo!
Woo!
Yeah, right? But then
constant AoE knockdown. Yay!
No, Tremor Totem is the immune to
the fear.
The fear,
right?
yeah. Fear, sleep,
right.
Whatever, which is fine.
So it's basically just for PvP.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
And before, they're going to make a raid fight that has a fear.
Look, I think you're going to find that most of those spec identity changes are going to come down to probably only PvP. It's going to be like, which classes get which types of CC, you know?
Kind of. Well, I mean, because like Warlocks still have just health stones. You still have Lock Gate, apparently. You should, I would imagine. It's not going anywhere. So there's still so many little things outside. So they're trying to find other little bits that not just like everyone has a stun or everyone has a slow. They're trying to put those nuggets back in. So
I feel like Warlock is probably one of the best examples of like class-based utility. It's just all of our stuff is unique.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you have Banish, which has overlap with like the Demon Hunter thing now.
In prison, yeah.
And Repentance, is it? The Paladin thing?
Paladin one, yeah.
We all do Demon Hunters, but those don't really function in the same way where Banish is like, it's very unique. The thing is immune to damage. Nothing works on it. It's just, it can't break. It's, yeah, I don't know. I feel like between Healthstone's Banish and that, we have a pretty unique toolkit, but we also have things like Fear, which is, you know, not a very cool thing.
You can
it has some uses in PvP, but yeah. I don't think I've used Fear in PvE once. Oh no, nope. You can use it to interrupt things sometimes. You can use it as a Gahddo interrupt, and that's pretty much its only use in PvE. Like it's not a traditional CC. Like we don't have a frog or a polymorph. We have this dude runs away for a little bit and probably will just take some damage and then come back.
Right.
And also he runs randomly, so it's probably going to go into another pack of mobs.
Bring back Glyph of Fear.
Seriously, right? Like, I fucking...
There was a couple.
Remember when we could actually like CC things in Mythic Plus? That was fun.
Yeah, Glyph of Fear. Bring
Glyph
it
of
back.
Fear. So it would just stand in place, terrified, like cowering. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That.
Oh, sorry, they gave that to Vengeance.
They did, and technically, Blood DK has it too, with Tremble Before Me.
Story of Warlocks and Legion. Let's figure out what we can strip away from Warlocks to add to Demon Hunter's kit.
Kind of, yeah. There was a question that came up. So Monscape asked, do you guys want to see Demonology get its meta form back?
Nope.
No.
No?
I mean, if they could literally completely revert Demonology back to the way it was in Mists of Pandaria or Warlords of Draenor, yeah, I would prefer that. Warlords Demo was probably my favorite spec of all time, specifically in BRF, but dude, they wouldn't do that, right? They would screw it up royally somehow.
What if it was just a cosmetic thing? Because I don't think there's there's no need to have Demonology so separated from Demon Hunter now, because they obviously use demonic energies differently. But if you could look demonic as a Demonology Warlock, would that not tie you to the whole fact that you're just a zookeeper for demons that do your bidding?
Bring back Glyph of Apotheosis?
Well, I mean, okay.
Yeah. Thinking, obviously.
Because they brought out a lot. Like I'm only salty about that because they took out Glyph of Ascendance, which turned me into Elemental Panda instead of this stupid broken model from Cataclysm. So it holds its weapons like sideways, upside down like this, and it punches like that. Come on. Can we talk about the Ascendance model, Blizzard? It's terrible. But why isn't the Demonology PvP talent that make the Doggos instant be a PvE thing instead and make it baseline? Well, that... I don't know how you guys like your PvP talents and how many of them probably should be PvE. I think every single class in the game has that, but I don't know what your thoughts on that is. Who wants to...
It breaks the Warlock rotation, actually. It breaks it.
It breaks it.
Yep.
If dogs were instant, it would break it.
Yep.
You need that cast time for lineups and whatever, I guess?
That, and you also don't want them to be instant, just because of how demonic empowerment actually works.
Yeah. They have a travel time, so for no apparent reason, the dogs spawn at your character and then jump to the target, which is something that they learned in BM, and we thought, like, they wouldn't do that again, but they did. It spawns at you and then jumps to the dude. So if you demonic empower... If it was instant, you could demonic empower before they get to the target, and it would just break a lot of things. There was actually a bug where they moved too slowly at the start of like TOS that has been since fixed. where you could actually just, in the normal rotation, if you had too much haste, demonic empowerment would go off before your dogs got to the target.
Oh no.
And then they made them slightly faster, so that doesn't happen anymore.
Okay.
But
how about?
I don't know. I haven't really PvP'd much this expansion, but there are a lot of talents that are just like.
was a PvP talent, so.
Yeah, DE was originally a PvP talent, and then they deleted
another PvP talent.
They deleted Soul Effigy, and they were like, "Hey, we don't have an idea to put here, so we'll just use the PvP one." But it worked out really well in the end. I'm glad they did it because DE is awesome.
How about, since Warlocks almost always got some kind of rework for each expansion, or at least Demonology, this is their third one in a row. Do you expect one for? Well, we went over this a little earlier for Battle for Azeroth, and hope it will mostly stay the way it is now with minor improvements. That I wanted to bring that up as a throwback to earlier in the show. We went over that. All the guests had some plugs for Destruction and Demonology specifically about that earlier in the show, so don't really need to go over it again. You guys already threw your darts on the board, hopeful. So
yeah, the one thing that I hope, and we talked about this in the pre-show, but we haven't really brought it up yet, is that Affliction's talents are just really, really well designed and balanced, and for the other two specs, it's just like there is a thing that you always pick in this scenario in every talent tier, and it's just always better, right? There's very little diversity in like Destruction. You pick like, oh, this is Cleave, I'm gonna play Wreak Havoc, or this is single target, I'm gonna play CDF, and there's no wiggle room in between the builds, right? Affliction's talents are set up in a way that most of them can do multiple fight types, right? Like Soul Harvest is longer the more targets that you have dots up on. Phantom Singularity just scales 1-to-1 in terms of damage with how many targets there are, right? So with Affliction, you have a lot of talent builds that are viable on any given fight, and I feel like that's a large part of the reason why the spec is just too good right now. It's not necessarily that look, it should get nerfed numerically. I'm not arguing that, but I don't think it's like as mechanically stupid as people think without the artifact. The artifact is the real issue, not the talents.
Sure.
Right? But because Affliction has this wide array of talents, it's good at a lot of different things. Whereas most other specs are just like, you do this one thing or you do this one thing, and there's no in between, there's no wiggle room. You either spec for AoE and you suck at single target, or you spec for single target and you suck at AoE. And I think that's like, you see in Mythic Plus specifically, there is a ton of variety in the builds that people use to push high keys based on things like the group comp, the affixes of the week, the specific dungeon. It's just, it has so much variability in the ways that you can play the spec and do damage compared to other specs that it's just kind of not fair to them.
Right. Well, I mean, you bring up not fair, and you're talking inner class wise with just Affliction versus Destruction and Demonology, whereas I sort of touch on this in the BTS podcast, and I know the YouTube comments are already going right now. Stop talking about enhancement on a Warlock show. That's how I relate to the game, okay? Is that I've had the same spec for well over almost a year now. People ask me on stream, what legendaries and talents are you running? And I hit N and C, and the same things I've had since the end of last tier, or the middle of last tier, right? Since the new legendaries came in. I haven't had any variants, because there's no point to change anything for my spec. There's no... It doesn't do anything. All the other talents are all usually numerically bad or poor or weaker. So that's a terrible thing to have. So I would love to have that flop talent potential. I can't.
One of the main selling points in Legion was that they wanted to make it so that you could just pick talents and you wouldn't, like, you could pick any of the talents and you wouldn't be gimping yourself for taking those talents, right? And I feel like Affliction is like I can't think of another spec. There probably is, but it's one of very few specs in the game where they actually succeeded on that. And because of that, it's just way better than Destruction and Demo, who, you know, are either doing single target or they're doing 2-target, or for Demo, single target and AoE. There's no middle ground.
Yeah.
I think in the case of Destruction, maybe Loozy can speak on that, but like Destruction plays really well in both of those cases, and the talents that Destruction has feel good. Like the ones that are optimal feel good to play with, unlike Demo. So people don't complain about it as much in Destruction. Whereas in Demo, it's like the best talents are also the ones that just people don't like playing with, and you have to play them. So people just don't play the spec.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Lucy brought that up a little bit when he was walking over the cookie cutter build, that there is a little bit of back and forth, but once they moved around your talents a little bit, that sort of got truncated to a degree.
That kinda, yeah, because you, like I said, you used to kinda always play the more or less like the same, you know, they swapped around some talents in Emerald Nightmare. So you used to go reverse entropy eradication. Like reverse entropy technically was like in a lot of instances it seemed a few K worse than mana tap. But mana tap was just, it was horrendous to play with, because you had to, like, you know, sacrifice a bit of mana here and then you could life tap as well, and it was just like balancing these two things, where reverse entropy was just flat out, it just felt good to play with combined with eradication, where reverse entropy would make you no longer need to life tap, and it would reduce the cast time of your chaos bolt by, I think it was half a second. And with you wanting to maintain your eradication, basically you would wanna, you know, you could push it a little more with reverse entropy and still not drop your eradication buff, and it was just, it felt really good to play. I personally I really enjoyed playing Destruction in Emerald Nightmare, even though I didn't have the one legendary that just made it so much more smooth to play.
Right. Which that's all changing, obviously, going into the next expansion. We're losing artifacts. Some of the artifact key passives or spells will become either talents or possibly integrated into the core of the class. We'll see more on that as the builds come out. Again, the Q&A is on Tuesday with Ian and Lore, and I'm pretty sure the last bit he's going to end with before they cut the stream is when alpha or beta, whatever they call it, is coming out, so we can start testing stuff.
I have no idea what you're talking about. They're definitely not going to announce beta.
I thought for a second there as well that you're going to say that they were going to end the stream with them saying, "We don't want you to play Affliction." It's
no.
By the way, guys, we're nerfing Affliction by 25%. We'd rather you don't play it.
Yeah.
That would be the greatest thing. I want that to happen. Please, Blizzard, if you're watching this, nerf Affliction by 25% and say don't play it. It's bad.
Please.
Like, go amazing. Full circle.
Just that's fine. Soapboxes. Do you have anyone you need to throw out some thanks to, or anything you want to end the show with to the Warlock community out there? This is your time, sir. Go for it. Whatever you want.
I just want to thank everyone in the Discord who's been involved with Lost and stuff. Realistically, none of it would happen without you guys, because it went from looking like a heaping pile of garbage to what it looks like today, with like lots of functionality, the ability to expand, the ability to have a number of other pages on the site. So Sevi in particular, she's been absolutely massive in terms of spreadsheeting, doing our charts and making everything look nice. Houdini does all the graphics. Really, 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 really good. Of course, Loozy and Gahddo, without you guys, I would probably not have this, because fuck me if I'm going to write 3 spec guides and want to blow my brains out.
Awesome. Gahddo, how about you, sir? What do you want to close with? Soapbox it up.
I'd like to give a shout out to Zyronic and Marvin. They help me a lot with like the boss specific guides that I write for Affliction, like figuring out which talents are going to be better on a given fight, because like a lot of the time there's like a build that you can play if you want to pad on ads,
Sure.
and then a build if you want to do good things for the raid, and like helping me figure out, is it actually better to do the ad build on a fight, or whatever. They help me out a lot even in my personal play, so I'd like to give them a shout out. But not hit most of the people on the head, everyone associated with Loss, all of the mods and contributors to Loss in the Warlock Discord. As far as soapboxing goes, there's only one thing we didn't talk about that I think is a pretty important point to take away from Legion, and that's destruction has the worst artifact in the game, and I will fight anyone who disagrees with me. It is... If you deleted the weapon entirely and just buffed the spec, it would be a better spec. Everything about that weapon makes the spec worse to play, and I hope literally none of it gets added to the game and be free.
Oh no. But wait.
Kinda true though.
If when you opened your portals, you didn't just hold your staff up, but you slammed it down like Gandalf and like a rift formed in the ground, and then a portal came up beside you with it, then it would at least look cool.
It would look cool. It would still suck though.
Oh, come on. Damn it.
I mean, have you played with Lord of Flames? You played during beta, right? You played
Just all the
Warlock
beta
at
stuff.
launch.
Yeah, all the beta stuff.
You played with Lord of Flames. Lord of Flames is one of the worst mechanics in the entire game.
You don't like your Infernal spawning mini Infernals?
I don't like never being able to use Infernal without proccing my 10-minute cooldown.
Oh, it's
No, that's not
But
fun.
It's really engaging.
The 10-minute cooldown that's attached to your AoE cooldown.
Yeah, I know.
Right, as an ICD. And by the way, the reason that Grimoire of Supremacy is like 1 to 2% better in Sims, but nobody ever uses it, is because they didn't really think about how that was going to work with Lord of Flames at all. Like, what happens when your Infernal is just permanent, right? So it's attached to the AoE stun that Infernal has when you talent Supremacy. It's a 1-minute cooldown AoE stun, and when you press it, it procs Lord of Flames.
Yeah.
And on single target, you have to start with your Infernal, have it run up to the boss, hit that button, spawn the Infernals, and then immediately switch to Doomguard mid-pull. Which is not exactly the most fun gameplay.
It's a little spaghetti, for sure. Just a little bit spaghetti. Loozy, what do you want to close with? Soapbox and shoutouts, or go for it.
I think pretty much not just covered it all. Log one-stop shop, everything. Obviously not for actually, well, I guess starting the whole website thing, but also really Gahddo, Silver, Motoko, everybody in the Warlock Discord that does like all the sims that I pretty much write my stuff from. Like if I wouldn't know like how to, if I had to freely craft that stuff and like experiment on PTR beta, like I just, if I'm looking for something, like I ping Motoko, I ping Gahddo or someone, and they like link a sim or link an HTML to something they did, and I just do my stuff from that. So I think pretty much that's about it.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a time to hit this button over here. And well, there it is. This was episode 163, the Warlock Ketchup episode. Next week should be Hunters. Week after that should be Mages. If Battle is out and coverage will change, I will stick to at least getting the pure DPS specs done, with a possibility for a tank catch-up and a healer catch-up. But after that, it's all Battle for Azeroth coverage. There'll be mixed shows. There'll be lots of coverage streamed here, like 60 plus hours a week, when I do all my feedback and nitty gritty and breaking stuff and trying to find things that don't work and finding out where there aren't hoof prints in the snow. That's a callback to Warlords beta testing. But of course, around the table real quick here, we had Loozy. You can go follow him on Twitter at LoozyWow and check out his destruction guide as it formulates and changes as battle comes out. So thank you for being the fresh meat on the show, sir. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And then there's Gahddo. You can go follow him on Twitter as well at the same name or the same in Discord. And go make sure you spam all the emotes at him in Discord, correct? Yeah? Is that how...
I hate you so much right now.
I mean, I hope...
Because they're going to.
Good. That's the whole point. That's what you deserve. I mean, thank you for being on the show again. Of course, we'll probably talk during beta, I imagine. But I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
No problem.
And there's Not, who apparently isn't Granddaddy Warlock, which we found at the beginning of the show. I didn't know that. I thought he did all the things, but apparently not exactly.
No, not exactly, but it was a pleasure as always, Bing.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Good luck in all of the Battle for Azeroth changes to come.
Look forward to it.
So that's going to be it. Of course, if you've missed this show, it goes up on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, audio only. There's a red subscribe button down there somewhere, or the button here on Twitch up in this corner, of course. If you want to support the show more directly, then that is up to you. You can also, I have to do this one more time, or my manager will get mad at me. Seriously, though, send me pictures or tweets of you eating these smoothies, or go look at my Instagram for the terrible videos I made when I was doing the What's My Smoothie hashtag, which I should do more of that because that was super fun. But go check out Daily Harvest and use the code FinalBossTV to get half off your first order of 6 cups of whatever you'd like. And it keeps my butt sitting here talking to other nerds for you. That's how this works, okay? Jeez. But thank you very much. Check out the Lock one-stop shop for all the Warlock stuff. Check out Hero Damage if you're turning to the game and you need to look at like what specs are working with what legendaries and other kind of good stuff. But until next week, everybody, trusting your seal of artifact power. Hopefully everyone's done with artifact grinding and you just log in and hit your red button and log out and raid. That's what I do. We're back to that point. But until next week, everybody. Bye! Bye-bye! Wave! Wave bye at the nice people! Wave bye at the nerds! Wave! Not wave at them! What are you gonna do?
Not.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for